Good news, everyone. Today, we're starting over in more ways than one, no? We're going to talk about reinventing the small stuff, reinventing your whole life, and reinventing your business. I am Briar Harvey, and this is Ask Briar. So, today is Tuesday, November 10th. The election has officially been declared for Joe Biden, which is wonderful news if, you care about civil liberties. It is not going peacefully, which is honestly not really a surprise to me. Every day in my journal, he still hasn't conceded yet. He still hasn't conceded yet. When I talk about starting over, it's a pretty layered issue. And it's because I've had to do it more than once in my life. When we talk about starting over, it frequently is not a choice we make of our own volition, right? Most of the time, we don't arbitrarily wake up one morning and say, I think I'd like to start over today. I'd like to wipe this slate clean and do something brand new. Now, sometimes that is a choice, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how to make that work for you. But in general, starting over comes from the change you need, not necessarily the change you want, which is common for a lot of us. Very frequently, there are circumstances or mitigating factors that necessitate starting over and figuring out how we do that, how we get to a place where we feel whole and safe and secure again. It's a really big deal. So let's get into it. I want to talk first about how we reinvent ourselves with the small stuff. So I'm going to tell you a story. Like so many of my stories, it's a really fun one, and you'll not be, no, I can't even lie about this anymore. When I was 12 years old, my parents were in the middle of a very rough divorce. It was highly contentious. And I had braces, and I was seeing this orthodontist. My mother didn't like him. That probably plays into this a little bit. But I was sexually assaulted by my orthodontist when I was 12 years old. And I told my father, and he did not believe me. Again, my mother didn't like the guy, so obviously this was an existing problem. And it became in my life an existing problem that showed up repeatedly. So I was suddenly branded the girl who lied, which became very much a piece of my identity. And in other ways, it certainly impacted my oral health. I blocked it out. I didn't think about it. And when I was about 18 years old or so, and I started the process of cutting my dad out of my life, I apparently vowed to never return to the dentist ever again. Because now I'm 40 and I haven't been back. So there is obviously a lot of processing required here, and therapy and doing the work. And I am doing those things, have been doing those things, in fact, for a couple of years since I recovered this memory. I shoved it in a very tiny box and locked it away and forgotten that this thing had ever happened to me, that this was very much a part of my history and a part of why I had such a fragile relationship with oral health. And when I made this realization and started recognizing what an impact this had on my life, I started reinventing the process of how I viewed oral care, right? With the small stuff, sometimes the easiest thing in the world is to just decide that you are a person who does this thing now. So 2 years ago, as I started having these revelations, I became a person who flossed their teeth. This was huge for me. I'd always had such a tenuous relationship with brushing my teeth, with flossing. I did it when I felt like it, and it was fine. It was fine, right? And after time, that just simply became a thing that I did. I was a person who flossed my teeth now. I had managed to figure out a way to reintegrate it into my life in a way that wasn't painful and in a way that didn't aggravate previous trauma, right? Because of this connection to my past, to the trauma that I had, brushing, flossing, it's like a minefield. When you have PTSD or CPTSD, so many of your everyday ordinary interactions, things that most of y'all take totally for granted, brushing my teeth, taking a shower, those are landmines littered with potential trauma. So figuring out ways to reinvent those things in small ways that allow me to decide that I am a person who does this thing now has been fundamentally life-altering in terms of reinventing small things. This doesn't work for big stuff, but with small things, it is easy to choose. And it's not easy, right? All choices of any kind, especially when they are attached to having to start over, having to reinvent ourselves, man, that shit's hard. And it's traumatic. And it causes us to doubt our identity and to doubt our ability to do anything at all. If I have a problem taking a shower, then obviously there is something fundamentally wrong with me, and I can't do anything else either. But we really have to start reframing our beliefs around how we see change and reinvention. Change isn't a bad thing. Reinvention, it's not a bad thing. Starting over, sometimes it's exactly what we need so that we can start again, right? So that's the small stuff. And that is just a piece. Sometimes we have to reinvent our whole lives. And that one's harder. A lot harder. In my life, this is something that I have done no less than 5 times. When I was younger, it was because my parents divorced and I moved. As an adult, it's been because of the loss of my child or the loss of a support structure. So when you're reinventing your whole life, you've got this beautiful blank canvas in front of you, and it stretches out in a way that you can't see or predict, in a way that seems like it has potential to be meaningful. The problem is we don't just reinvent our lives. We bring all the old shit with us. It doesn't just go away. We don't just get to turn a page and be a new person. We have to really consciously choose what and how we integrate who we were into who we are becoming. So let's talk about what that looks like and feels like. In my life, I have most likened this most frequently to that of metamorphosis, the butterfly and the chrysalis, right? The caterpillar goes and builds the chrysalis around itself, and then when it emerges, wings. We have children's books and plays and stories. It's wonderful. Transformation, metamorphosis is something magical. But the actual process of it is something entirely different. And I don't know, this is probably just me being me, but in times of transformation, I've spent a lot of time wondering what it must be like to be that caterpillar, to build this cocoon, this chrysalis. There's what goes in to becoming, into transforming. Do you know? Because you can't possibly, right? A caterpillar can't know what it'll be like to fly. They've never had wings. They've never experienced flight. A caterpillar can't know what it's going to be like to be a butterfly. They're operating on instinct, yes, but if we bring that into our own lives, what does that transformation look like? What does it feel like? How do you incorporate it in ways that allow you to grow? So if you're reinventing yourself, again, we're typically talking about trauma, whether it's short term, whether it's long term. Reinvention comes because something happened and we can't be that person anymore. We don't want to experience those things anymore, perhaps. Or maybe we just need to separate ourselves from them physically so that we can reach a place of healing and reach a place of peace. Fundamentally, what makes transformation work, what makes reinvention work, is that you figure out what didn't work and leave it behind and only pull forward the things that are good. So if we're starting over and we are frequently leaving behind trauma, we are also frequently leaving behind what was our support network. This happens sometimes out of necessity in the case of addiction or moving. Sometimes this happens because you've outgrown whatever support structure you had. Whatever the reason, when we don't have a support structure, it makes it both harder and easier to complete the process of reinvention. So if we're in a new place, in a new time, and reinventing our whole new life, the first thing you have to start with is your foundation. The new page, the new leaf, none of that matters if you're building on the shaky ground that you left behind. So we start then by looking very closely at what our foundations are. For most of us, that's our beliefs, who we are, what's important to us, what we value. Those are the things that build the rest of our life. That's what we want to hang things on. And our beliefs frequently change. We grow. Things happen. Trauma happens. Anything can change a belief. That's what makes it wonderful and how we grow. But as we look at our beliefs, it's important to assess whether or not they are helping us or harming us in constructing the rest of our foundation. So we start then by leveling out our beliefs, figuring out what our values are, and then we can start putting the foundation in place on top of that, right? And your foundation is your support circle. If it's not family, and sometimes it's not family, we have to be very, very intentional about building it. The internet has become a truly marvelous place for this, and in my own life, I have fully constructed networks that support me in ways that I can't even describe. All of you listening and watching, you have become very foundational to me as my support structure. I may not know all of your names. I don't know all of your stories, but you remain a part of my life in a very concrete way. And that is because I've had to build that support network. I have had churches that has not always worked out for me. I have had social groups that has not always worked out for me. So every time you have to restructure a social group or figure out the social foundations of your life, you're starting from a place of disadvantage because you're new and you don't know anybody. But this is also kind of a unique blessing in a way, because you can come in with vulnerability. You don't have to be the strong stoic type if you do not wish to be. You can choose how you are going to portray yourself for your new social circle. You can choose what stories you're going to tell and how you're going to let your community support you. When trauma happens, when something unexpected happens, and we have to reinvent, frequently we're left with a hole where a support we thought existed didn't. This doesn't happen to everyone, and I hope that it never happens to you. But if it does, what we have to do is kind of emergency breach filling, right? In those cases, knowing where our best possible resources are, both for yourself and other people, is helpful. Knowing that ahead of time is helpful. But if you do not know, if you need to build out those resources ahead of time, I always recommend 211, the United Way. Figure out what it is that you need so that you can figure out how to get what you need. Every time we have to reinvent and we have to start over, We have to start over from a fresh knowledge base too. So it becomes okay if we don't have all of the answers. It's okay if we need help reframing the question. Sometimes we just don't know what to ask. And if you can approach this new story with a willingness to be vulnerable, it will take you in some surprising destinations. I can practically guarantee it. So, the small stuff, your whole life. Finally, let's talk about the thing that at least 70% of my listeners are here for. How do we reinvent our businesses? When my son died, I was working as a sex coach. I had just created this amazing program, Life and Sex After a Baby. I was going to teach women for 3 months, right up until about the baby was born, how to figure out how to get their bodies and their lives and build systems after having a child. When I didn't have a child anymore and I canceled that course, I also had to figure out what to do with my business. Initially, I really tried to keep going. It was foolish in the extreme, but I felt like it was this piece of continuity, right? That if I could just keep going, if I could keep my business afloat, then I could figure out how to grieve less. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I called it intentional grieving, as though we can put a timeline on grief, as though we have the ability to say, this is what grief is going to look like for me, and I'm going to map it out, and then I'm going to fit it into my life the way I fit everything. No, it didn't work like that, not at all. And the piece of my business that I thought would be continuity turned out to be a fucking nightmare. I couldn't talk to women about having babies. I didn't have a baby. I couldn't work with private clients. I couldn't do any of those things. And so my business just kind of collapsed in on itself while I did nothing more and more and more until suddenly I wasn't making any money. And then after my social support network blew up and my husband and children and I were briefly homeless, and then we ended up with my mother-in-law, who took us in and fed us and housed us and helped us get back on our feet, because grief is a hell of a fucking thing. And I took most of that time off. I was ostensibly still working, but I couldn't. It just didn't ever feel right. It wasn't working for me. So ultimately, I ended up just kind of exploding it. And then I got pregnant, and I was like, oh, well, okay, things are different now. I had a baby, and I decided that it was time for me to go back to work. But I couldn't do what I was doing before. It wasn't realistic. It didn't feel right. So I took the piece that I still liked, which was the writing and the creating content, and decided to go become a content writer, a copywriter. I did a little bit of both. And then I started designing courses. And somewhere along the way, I figured out the process of creating back-end systems, building funnels. I kind of fell into it. It didn't happen ever the way that I would have expected. And so I've spent virtually the last 4 years, 3 years, going, this is what I do today. Today I am a copywriter. Tomorrow I will be a systems expert and a podcaster. That's what it is today. And it changes. It changes fairly often. I see the process of reinventing my business as a sign of growth, that I am learning and evolving and becoming something new in my business. But that can be hard to keep people coming along with me. So when we're reinventing our businesses, probably the most important thing we need to look at is, do we do it all at once or do we do it a chunk at a time? In many cases, you're going to be best served to reinvent all at once, to spend the time and money on a branding expert, to figure out who you are and what that looks like. I recommend Sarah Ashman. If you are newer in business and you need to build something out fresh, I would look at Dusty Arab's Bite-Sized Business. Whatever you're building, knowing what that business looks like is really important to start with. But sometimes it just doesn't happen that neatly or organically, as my whole life in business has been a testament to. So when you're doing it slowly, what are ways that you can make it feel organic and allow people to come along the journey with you? So in fact, you're looking at quite a few if you're watching. Behind me is my Starry Night hanging. I use the Starry Nights. It's my bag. It's in my curtain. I use it in my branding logos occasionally. So you'll see this image in places. You'll also see the purple that I use, and I have my little teardrop logo. That's been with me since the beginning. In fact, almost 10 years now, I've had that logo in some shape or form. And as I've evolved, it has too, but it's a beautiful piece of how I've grown. If you can keep some kind of consistency with just a logo or branding colors even, that will help as you reinvent slowly. Other things you can do are just to be honest about the process. When we are personality businesses in particular, the work that we do, the way that we serve our clients, that changes. And it's okay to say, hey, the thing that I was doing before, it's not really working for me anymore. This is the last time I'm offering it. From now on, I'm doing this thing. If you have people that need this thing, come see me. And in this way, you can build out your network and your referrals and really make your business grow. It's important to figure out the ways that your prospects, your top of funnel people, can connect all the way down to the products that you are selling. And when you're reinventing yourself, sometimes that's just about having the conversation. You want to ask, what do your people want? What do they need? What can you guide them through as you grow? It's all a process of evolution. And the more that we are willing to embrace it, to embrace our faults, to be willing to say, I don't know what the answer is, the more likely our business is to carry us through those things. Finally today, if you are interested in having me take a look at your business, let me know. You can find me at briarharvey.com. If this recording has been helpful to you in some way, you are welcome to buy me some Sad Lonely Tacos. That is ko-fi.com/Briar. As always, y'all, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for being my foundation and for being a part of my system. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.